Welcome to this week's Ask Charlie. I am back in the kitchen and this time with a basket of homegrown rhubarb beside me. Lots and lots of questions recently about rhubarb, so I thought actually this week I would dedicate a blog post to it. From growing it to picking it and cooking with it, we will be discussing it this week. So I think we should get out in the garden first, and I am going to talk you through my rhubarb and show you exactly how I pick it. This rhubarb is well established. It's been in this bed now for a number of years, so I'm planning this winter to use a rhubarb forcer for the first time and have some really delicious forced rhubarb. But if you've got a young rhubarb plant, you want to wait till it's about 2 or 3 years old before you force it, because you really want the plant to be well established. I'm going to show you the best way to pick rhubarb. So we're going to get in here, in amongst these leaves, and have a good look at what we've got. So this piece of rhubarb, for example, I'm going to pick, and you just want to snap it by pushing it down slightly and a little twist. You don't want to use a knife when you're picking your rhubarb. You just want to pull it off. So this one in here has died. We don't want that. But look, this is a lovely pink one. So again, just push down, a little bit of a twist and pull like that. And you can see down in here, these new shoots. In fact, that one got slightly damaged, but there's another one coming. And you just want to be selective over which ones you pick off. So that, if it hadn't have snapped off, would have been a delicious piece of rhubarb, but it's no problem. There's plenty more in here to pick. So I'm just quite selective. I mean, I've got this really big root of a piece, which I probably should have taken off a while ago. But we'll get that out. So just remember, absolutely no knives. Give it a pull and give it a little bit of a twist as well. So in my kitchen garden, in one corner, I've put in a rhubarb plant here. So the idea is when I force the other one, which I've had for a while, I can then use this and have an abundance of rhubarb up here. I use it a lot for cooking and making gin as well. So it will be great to have some more rhubarb in this kitchen garden area. So in this other corner of my kitchen garden, I have put in another rhubarb. Now this variety is called a Victoria, and it's apparently really good for forcing. So I thought in a couple of years' time, I would force this as well. Now let's talk a little bit about forcing rhubarb and why people do it. So if you want to have really delicious pink tender, that really bright pink vibrant colour that you get from rhubarb, that is normally because it's been forced. And you put a cloche over it, not a clear cloche, like a terracotta one, something like that, and it helps create an atmosphere of warmth and darkness, which is why you get those really deep, beautiful, vibrant pinks that we see from forced rhubarb. It's done, in December through to early spring. You can force your rhubarb, and it really, is very, very popular up in Yorkshire. So that's where we get a lot of our forced rhubarb from early in the season. But it's such an incredible colour, and it's really to do with photosynthesis and the amount of light that the plant gets. So hopefully that tour outside was really, really helpful. So I have got my rhubarb here in my basket. It is still, you know, covered in all sorts. So we're going to just chop it up and give it a good wash. Now I will take those up later and put all of those, you know, leaves onto the compost and put it back into the ground. So I'm just going to pull off any kind of ratty bits. Now for this recipe that I'm going to show you, it just needs to be roughly chopped in chunks. If you get kind of stringy bits on the rhubarb, I just pull them off. I'm just going to roughly chop it and then pop it into my colander here, and then I can give it a good wash. So I'm going to chop, I don't want to have too much of the green, so I'm going to cut it about there. Now if I'm going to keep that end bit on because actually it's really delicious, really tender. Quite a lot of people just discard it, but actually there's so much goodness in there. Now let's talk about the colours that we get. Let's get a really pink bit. So this here, you can see it's a really good colour, as is huge, huge leaves, as is that, you know, down at the end. And that is really because of the amount of light that it has had. So again, that bit has obviously been shadowed by lots of these big leaves. And so it's really, really pink and really tender. And that's why you force rhubarb, so you can get it kind of like that all the way up. Because I've got my rhubarb, my big plant that I've just shown you, it's in quite a compact corner and I've got chicken wire around it. Now the chicken wire really is to protect it from any rabbits and things like that that might get in there. But it also keeps the leaves upright, and so it restricts the light in. So in some ways that works as more of a natural cloche. Whereas if you have your rhubarb out like I will have in my kitchen garden without anything holding it up or supporting it, it will have more light coming in. So, you know, it just depends on where your rhubarb is in your garden. But I quite like the fact that my big, more mature plant is restricted in how much it can grow outwards. And so I do get some really tender rhubarb from it. Many people think that rhubarb is a fruit, but it's not. It's an edible plant stalk. And I say stalk because actually the leaves are poisonous. So you mustn't cook with these. The rest of the rhubarb stalk is absolutely fine. It's utterly delicious and wonderful. But cut the leaves off. They're fine to compost, brilliant to compost, but just don't cook with them because they are poisonous. I'm going to show you how to make a rhubarb frangipani galette. And it sounds terribly complicated, but actually it's not. And that's why I thought I would show you how to do it, because it's always so much easier when you've seen a demo. So I've got my rhubarb that I have washed and it's all chopped up in here. Now actually this is more than the recipe says. This is about 850. The recipe is approximately 750, but actually I'm going to have a little bit left over that I can enjoy for my breakfast. So, you know, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter if you've got slightly too little as well. It's all about improvising, and I am going to be improvising slightly today because I don't have an orange. So I would normally be using orange zest and the juice of the orange, but I don't have any. So I'm just going to use a sprinkle of brown sugar. And again, you can use any sugar that you have to hand. So it's about a tablespoon of brown sugar. Now I'm just going to use some Tropicana instead. Just a little splash. There. Star anise, they are just wonderful. They have the most incredible flavour. They're just amazing, sort of quite aniseedy. So I'm going to put in a few of those onto my tray. And some whole cloves as well. Oh, this is a new pot. Oh, no, it's not. A handful of cloves in there too. And a little bit of mixed spice. So these are all things that I associate with kind of Christmas, but actually they're just delicious, fragrant things to really enhance the flavour of our rhubarb in our tray there. So I'm going to put this now into my baking oven of my Olga. So that's about 160 degrees centigrade for 20 minutes. I'm going to put it in the middle shelf, not on the floor and not too close to the top. I just want it to soften. Now for the pastry, you can do this by hand, but actually I'm going to show you how just to whiz it up in the Magimix. So I'm going to weigh out my flour. I'm using plain flour. So it's 250 grams of plain flour. And I do find when you're making pastry, you do want to be accurate. A lot of the time, you know, if there's a recipe, I will wing it, you know, with the rhubarb, I've put more in than the recipe says. But with pastry, you need to be precise. It's a precision exercise. So that's slightly over. And that's why I'm carefully using a spoon rather than just pouring it. Now, when a recipe says to dice butter, it also is telling you that it needs to be cold. So if a recipe says softened butter, that can be, you know, softened from the fridge, you know, in advance. But if it says dice, you want it to be cold straight from the fridge. And that's really one of the crucial things when you're making pastry. So I have literally just taken this out and I'm going to chop it in to small cubes. And I want 150 grams of cold diced butter. So I've got my butter and my flour in there. I'm not going to put the other ingredients in yet, just the butter and the flour at this stage. And pop it onto your Magimix. Now you can totally do this by hand, exactly the same principle, but you just really carefully make it into fine breadcrumbs. This works very quickly in the Magimix, but you don't want to overdo it. So you just pulse it until it's just ready. Don't overdo it, because if the butter gets too warm, it will go into a bit of a mush, and it just makes a real difference to your pastry. So just really quickly blitz it. In fact, I haven't put the lid on properly, that would help. Ooh. So you can either pulsate it or you can do it on auto. On auto, I'm guessing it's probably about 20 seconds until it's ready and done. Really important not to overwork it. Okay, so it's just like that. Right, we can now add in our other ingredients. 3 tablespoons of caster sugar. So I'm not going for heaped tablespoons, just relatively level ones. A pinch of sea salt, and I crush it between my fingers as I add it in. 1 egg yolk, so I'm just going to crack my egg into the bowl, keep my white in there and tip the yolk in. So in that goes. And then 3 tablespoons of cold water. 1, 2, 3. With all the rest of my ingredients in there, I'm going to just blitz it again with the Magimix, but again, not for too long. You don't want to overdo it. Just until it's combined. So I think that was literally about 10 seconds. Right, let's clear the decks slightly. And I'm going to use this bowl here to tip my pastry mixture into. I just need to give it a quick dry. So in that goes to there. And just use your hand to wipe off any of the pastry around the side. Make sure you've got it off your blades. And then I'm just going to carefully, using my hands really gently, just form it into, so I'm not kneading, I'm just bringing it together into a ball like so. And I'm flicking it everywhere as well. So just bring it all together. Don't overwork it. It's really important that you don't handle it any more than necessary. Get it in a ball, and then I'm going to wrap this in cling film and pop it into the fridge to chill while my rhubarb is also cooling as well. So let's get the cling film out and wrap that up. At least 30 minutes to an hour chilling time in the fridge. My rhubarb has had 20 minutes in the agar. It's smelling incredible, and I'm just going to leave it to one side to cool. The pastry is in the fridge cooling, and I thought it was time to have a scone. So I made these yesterday, and I made some rhubarb and vanilla jam. It's a slightly peculiar colour, but it tastes really good. And actually, that's what's important, isn't it? It's quite solid. It probably had an extra few minutes cooking time that it could have done, but it was the first time I'd made it, so it's always a little bit of trial and error. But anyway, lovely warm scones. So even if you don't eat them when you've just cooked them, it's always a good idea to warm them up because they're so much better warm. Now I'm a Devon girl, so it's cream first, and I think of it as you'd put butter on your bread before you put jam on. So I think of it like that, but I know it's quite a controversial topic whether it's cream first or jam first. Anyway, cream and then some of my rhubarb jam. Really good, really good. The rhubarb jam is quite sharp, which is lovely. It's not too sweet, and I think it works brilliantly. Normally I'm a strawberry jam girl on my scones, but this I think might convert me. To make the frangipani, you don't even need to wash up your Magimix bowl, which is even better. I've got 80 grams of ground almonds, which I'm going to tip into my bowl. 80 grams of softened unsalted butter. So this has been sitting out for a little while. Scrape as much of that off as I can. And I need a bit more, so I've got some here too. all a bit melted buttery, messy. 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and it is worth getting a really good quality one as well. Tip that in, and then a pinch of sea salt. And 2 tablespoons of caster sugar. And then give it a whiz up. It doesn't matter if you over whiz this, you can't do any damage at this stage. So just pop it on. It won't need very long, probably about 30 seconds. And you want it so it's in like a paste like that. So I'm just going to set that to one side as well. My rhubarb is cool and it's time to do our pastry. I love these blue mats for pastry, for rolling things out. They work really well and I use them all the time. So I've got my pastry here, but I'm actually going to roll my pastry out onto greaseproof paper. I've literally got this down today for additional grip to stop sliding, because it can get a little bit slippery with the greaseproof paper on the granite directly, but the silicone provides a grip for me. Now you may wonder why I've got 2 pieces of greaseproof paper, and you will see why in a minute. It's a bit of a trick and it works terribly well. So I'm going to put 1 piece down onto my silicone mat. I'm going to open up my pastry. And place that in the center. Now the great thing about these silicone mats is they have got measurements on, so I can work out approximately how big a circle I need. I don't want my pastry to split, so I'm just squashing it down, but also sort of squashing it together. Again, you don't want to overwork it. Now I'm going to put this second piece of greaseproof paper onto the top of my pastry there, and I'm going to roll it out between the 2 layers. I'm just working my way to try and make my pastry as even as possible, and just spread it out, trying to keep it in a circle if and where possible. You want to ensure that it doesn't go over the edge of your greaseproof paper. That is important, to try and keep it within those sides. When your pastry is rolled out on your greaseproof paper, you can just peel back the top one. And it has slightly stuck to it, but it's okay. You could lightly dust your greaseproof with a little bit of icing sugar or flour, but actually it doesn't matter too much, because we're actually going to cook it on this bottom piece of greaseproof, so that will work absolutely fine. I just got a ruffle in my greaseproof. Now this has got quite soft, so I'm going to pop it onto my arbor tray like that and just put it in the fridge to chill for half an hour before I put the rhubarb on and do the next part. My pastry has just had its second chill once it's been rolled in the fridge. And you can just, if you want to, just dust your rolling pin with a little bit of flour, or you can use icing sugar, and just make sure it's nice and even. You don't need to do this at all, but if you want to, you can just do that. Really important though to always dust your rolling pin, and then your pastry doesn't stick. So I have got my frangipani, that's straight over there, and I'm going to put this in the centre of my pastry and just literally dollop it on, and then we will spread it out. So I'm not going to spread it all the way to the edge. I want to leave about 5 or 6 centimetres from the edge of the pastry. So really you're just dolloping this in the centre and spreading it around. So you want it to be evenly spread. Now at this stage I'm going to lift it up and place it into my baking tray. You can leave it in your baking tray. I just wanted to show you how important it is to have on your greaseproof paper, because otherwise it makes it very, very tricky to lift. Now I'm using some tongs because I don't want too much of the juice from my rhubarb, and I also don't want the star anise or the cloves in there. So using the tongs, I can just carefully pick out my rhubarb and place it over that amazing almond frangipani. Now I've got my rhubarb all arranged, I'm just going to lift up this edge and fold it back in over itself, like so. You want to work quite quickly because actually now my pastry's been out of the fridge for a little while. It's got quite soft, so you want to do this quite swiftly. It's easier the cooler your pastry is. Mine has got really soft. It's okay. And again, you can just lift the paper up to ease it off. And then that stops anything leaking out. It just gives it a nice edge. And it's not, we're not going for a thing of beauty. We're just going for deliciousness. And you know, you've seen me grow it. You've seen me cook it. And now, you know, we've created this. We're going to just brush a little bit of butter. So I've kept this butter here, and I'm just going to brush it onto the exposed pastry, and then we will cook it in the oven and enjoy eating it. But I get so much pleasure from growing things in the garden and then creating something with them and enjoying it as a family and being able to share with you guys as well. It's ready to go into the Arga, so I'm going to put it in for 30 to 35 minutes into my baking oven. So that's the equivalent of about 160 degrees centigrade. I'm putting it in the middle of the oven as well, not on the floor and not too close to the top either. I just want it to cook evenly throughout. And I've got my plain cold sheet at the ready too. So this is for Arga users only. If you want to stop the top of whatever you're cooking, you know, burning or, you know, cooking too quickly. So if you're baking a cake or something, you can slide your plain cold sheet in and that just deflects the heat from the top and it stops the top burning. So I think after 20 minutes, I'm going to check mine and I might need to slide this in if I think the top is cooking too quickly, but the rest needs a little bit longer. Very pleased with how this has turned out. It is smelling amazing and I think it's best served with either clotted cream if you're going for the high calories or something like creme fraiche. But I hope me showing you some rhubarb ideas today and how to pick it, how to grow it, how to, you know, prepare it, gives you the confidence to get out there and to do it. Rhubarb is so unbelievably easy to grow and it's just really versatile as well. You can use it with savoury things, you can use it with sweet things. I mean, probably the best known thing is rhubarb crumble. I personally love, and the stewed rhubarb leftovers that I've got here, I'm just going to actually blitz up, puree them, and I will have them with Greek yogurt and my granola for breakfast. And that will live in the fridge, you know, for a good 5 days, be absolutely fine. So that is a really good way, you know, to enjoy it for breakfast and pretty, you know, healthy as well. There's just a sprinkling of sugar, but you do need a little bit of sugar because it is quite tart and quite sharp a taste. So you do need to balance that out. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please do give it a big thumbs up if you have. Leave me a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and please also share my channel. I'd love more people to find me so we can grow and I can continue to make content for you. Anyway, wishing you a really great weekend and lots of love. I will be filming a Q&A video in a couple of weeks' time, so also leave any questions that you've got for me that you'd like me to answer in the comments below as well, and I will answer those for you in a couple of weeks' time.